PDC began in 1992 following Hurricane Iniki. One of the needs that was recognized during this time was that there was no mechanism in place or no organization in place that could effectively leverage the science and technology into disaster management. And from this, the idea of PDC was born. We were placed on Maui in the tech park along with the high-tech computing center. And we began our operations in 1995. PDC worked largely in Hawaii and the Pacific community during that time. In 2001, we entered into a cooperative agreement. That was with the East-West Center. And then in 2006, our cooperative agreement was taken over by the University of Hawaii, where we have remained ever since. And currently, we are recognized for our global work, and you see Dr. Erin Huey there, who unfortunately couldn't make it today. She was supposed to be here, but I'll do my best impersonation of her. Recognized for the innovations in our disaster management science and our technology. So our mission is a humanitarian one, a global humanitarian mission, and we work to build disaster resilience. Wherever we can, we want to look at bringing in the best science, technology, and lessons learned from communities around the world. Our primary mission is to bring those back home here to Hawaii and implement those. As I mentioned, we have been recognized for this work. We are the only US-based agency to win the Sasakawa Award for disaster resilience and disaster risk reduction based off of our work for disaster risk intelligence. We do this, though, not alone. We do this through our partnerships that we leveraged all over the world. We work very closely with non-governmental organizations, international and regional organizations, and NDMOs. And for those of you not in the disaster management space, that's the National Disaster Management Organizations, or your FEMA equivalents all over the world. And we work very closely to understand their needs, their gaps, and their understanding of resilience, and try to integrate that into our work with them and abroad. And just a quick list of a few of our partners. We work very closely with the US agencies you see here, many of the international regional organizations that you're all familiar with, some that you might not be, such as the CDEMA, Caribbean Disaster Management Agency. And as I mentioned, many, many NDMOs all over the world, far too many to list here. And we have two key areas that we work to build resilience. The first is the early warning for all. And this terminology you may hear, the UN is very big on this and put out a call, I believe 2 years ago, to develop systems that are early warning for all. And what that means is the ability to alert populations of impending disasters, to give them the necessary information to understand what those disasters mean. So what are the impacts? What are the potential impacts? And also the ability to protect their assets and their livelihoods and to understand what's going on. So a few ways in which we do this is we bring in currently 28 different hazard types. These are not just natural hazards. We do bring in health hazards as well as man-made and conflict-based hazards as well. We are the only system currently that provides comprehensive global coverage. So our mission is global coverage, and we work very closely with partners such as NASA you see here to provide that global coverage where it's lacking. So the NASA example here is floods, landslides, and wildfires. I think we're the only one that are bringing in their 3 models. They build and develop the models. We provide the technology and the support to host those models so we can then provide the early warning that I mentioned. We integrate models such as the ones I've mentioned into the impact assessments. My team, among others, have developed what we call the All Hazards Impact Model, which is a database of population data. It's a 30-meter resolution, population gridded data set with the built environment where we can take hazards, understand essentially where these exposure zones are. You see an earthquake right here, and instantaneously get the population exposed, the breakdown, the demographic breakdown, the breakdown of key needs, which we get from the SPHERE guidelines internationally or the FEMA guidelines within the United States, and the total replacement value of the capital stock exposed. So if a building were in that hazard zone and completely damaged, how much would it cost to completely replace that? So we call this our event brief. It's a brief on the current event that you see in the system. Each hazard that meets the threshold of a watch or a warning will get an event brief generated from it if there is population exposed. These are almost near real time. We're working, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the technology we're leveraging to increase this capacity here. And we work very closely, again, with our partners to understand what do you need as an emergency manager, as a decision maker, what do you need to see on these? And we're constantly refining, building this out so they can have that rapid access to quick information that they can use to make their decisions. If you're using the system, and by the way, I'll show a link here, the disaster management system that we have is called Disaster Aware Pro. There's a free version you can download on your app. There is also a password protected version that I can provide a link to, and anyone here would be eligible for that. It's free. We don't charge anyone anywhere for it. We do password protect it because during times of disaster, we don't want everyone in the general public logging in and then slowing things down. Although we are making a lot of progress with speed, putting things in the cloud where possible, it still does slow it down somewhat. As a user, you have the ability to alert yourself based on the area, based off of the severity of each of the hazards you're interested in following. If you're traveling, you can mark yourself as an asset, so you'll get alerts wherever you're moving to understand the hazards in the area where you currently are. One example of this is we prototyped this with Meta, the Mark Yourself Safe thing in Facebook. I know many have used it. It's been a while since I've logged into Facebook. Forgive me if I'm a little out of date there, but that was developed in coordination with PDC. And we also provide live cameras. You can understand, during a disaster, the conditions on the ground. This is used quite often in places like Florida and Louisiana during hurricanes for contraflow to see traffic situations. You can also use it. We use it quite a bit when there are tsunami watches and warnings. You can see what's going on along the coastline. It's also good if you want to check on the surf if you're on your way out for the day. You can see what's going on down at the beach, or you can check on your colleagues if they happen to have called in sick on a particularly good surf day. You can kind of just take a quick peek, make sure they are actually sick. Again, I mentioned that this app is publicly available. We have over 3.5 million downloads. It's been recognized by the Emergency Preparedness Pod as a free app. We are trying to work, to make it as useful to the population as possible. When all else fails, if that's not what can be achieved, we do work very closely with other agencies to build custom versions of this. A few that I'd like to bring attention to are the AHA Center. So this is the Humanitarian Assistance Center in the ASEAN Center. And what they decided was they needed one because they have their own data and their own systems that pull in for their early warning. And they did not want to have to deconflict those within the larger system, so we built them. They're one of our prime users. Over the last, I'd say 2.5 years, we've developed a version for IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency. As you can imagine, that has helped to kind of refocus and reinform what risk actually means. You think you understand disaster risk until you're responsible for a nuclear reactor. Then that kind of changes the whole calculus on you there. So we work to custom tailor alerts to IAEA as well. We also have one for Indonesia, Philippines, the Balkan region, and there's one under development in the Bahamas as well. And the other area of focus I'll spend a little bit more time on today is our advanced analytics, which encompasses our AI and data science efforts. And I just want to, before I get into what we actually do, one of the things that I think that I've heard today that I'd like to highlight that we have seen and we work on quite a bit as we go around, and I was just talking about this morning, is that when we look at some of these health disparities, the root causes of those health disparities are also the root causes of disaster vulnerability. So if we can work together to kind of address these, it's what, if you work with the Department of Defense, they call that a force multiplier. We could do more with less. Time and time again, we just trace back these disaster vulnerabilities, these disparities, the inequalities, go right back to disaster vulnerability. And those are the same things we're dealing with here with the wildfire study. So working together, and it's our hope that, from this effort, our humble minor participation in this, we can help to shine a light on the overlap between these two areas and understand how we can work together to kind of address these two key areas. So the advanced analytics works kind of in 4 areas. We have statisticians, people that are focused on visualization and communication of results. We do leverage machine learning and some AI. But I love this slide. You see these 2 people right here. They're presenting our work and our results, and neither one of them works for PDC. And we love this because what we want to do is do the work and enable those who need the work to be done to then own that work, to communicate that work, and then to put it to use. You also see the quote here. This was the one of the Indy PBAs, which I'll get to what those are in a minute. We did a risk assessment in Panama, and they found it particularly useful, so we work with them to integrate that into some of their policy. And the Ministry of the Interior and Panama Civil Defense now uses both our technology and our analytics. One of the things we see are a hot topic, particularly in the disaster management space, is AI. People think that they're going to use AI to predict disasters, AI to predict all of these things, but what we have done is, and we actually trademarked this before anyone else got to it, AI for humanity. And what we're doing here is we're not trying to use AI to predict a disaster, and we're not trying to use AI to put our analysts out of jobs or to supplant others that are doing good work. We're leveraging AI, one, to process our data more quickly, but also to help break down this complex information into understandable, actionable insights without any other intervention. So what we're doing right now is we're building large language models that a user of Disaster Aware in the new version that should come out in the next quarter of next year will enter what their responsibilities are, who they are, what their background is, and the messaging, the area brief, the information in there will come with, these are your next steps. This is what you should expect. This is what you can do. And that ranges anywhere from, a 4-star over at Indo-PACOM to a single parent with their child in their home. It'll tell them, okay, you can expect high-level winds. You may want to go out, check your yard for debris. You may want to tie down any loose furniture, bring in any excess toys, check on your neighbors, things like that. To an emergency manager saying, these are the things that you should do. So we're building and refining those models with other experts right now. And then also just leveraging the AI to augment the insights that are produced by the underlying assessments. The AI is not going to do the assessments for us. We find that's just not, I think, the space that we want to be in. But this is an area we are kind of excited about because it's actually taking this highly complex scientific technical information and making it available to the widest possible variety of users. One of the things that we've done at PDC is we've continued to build off of our experience. The risk and vulnerability assessment, we have a global risk index we produce every year. And that was one of the first things we were asked to do at PDC, so we do it diligently. But from that, we've built off this 20-year kind of understanding of what drives global risk. And I mentioned some of those key indicators of disaster risk. And we're able to now use this entire process to understand more complex, more dynamic kind of risk scenarios. A few examples here. we've been able to leverage this approach to look at the impacts of climate change. And we haven't been able to show directly that climate change has an X amount of an effect on a particular climate-driven hazard, but we have decided that it's more important to show what it means to the population based off of a model. So if you're looking at a model of extreme heat, for example, what's the population exposure going to look like in 2050? What % of the population are going to be living in areas that would be potentially not inhabitable based off of the current models? What infrastructure exists in there? So taking the same approach we have with our event briefs and area briefs, just applying that to climate change analysis and showing kind of the breakdown of the infrastructure and the population exposed. And I mentioned that we're constantly building and refining what we've done with the risk and vulnerability assessment. And I said one of the things that drives disaster vulnerability is inequality. And we were asked, based off our work there, by the Department of Defense, actually, to look at women, peace, and security, how the gender inequality, looks country to country. And we started this with US Indo-PACOM, and they were quite happy with the way we were able to do it, and each region asked us to continue that work and funded that work. And we were able to produce these kind of gender profiles for every country globally based off of that work. And this is important because this informs now, goes back into our disaster risk models. Our understanding of, women, peace, and security, how inequality drives insecurity, how inequality drives conflict, now makes its way back into our disaster risk understandings as well. So these kind of continue to feed on each other. But I think the thing that we're most proud of at PDC is working directly with stakeholders to understand disaster risk. And one of the ways we do that is with this National Disaster Preparedness Baseline Assessment. And this is a comprehensive assessment. We don't just go in and do a risk assessment to a country. We work very closely to understand their needs. We do look at hazard exposures and disaster risk, but we put this in context with the current disaster management capabilities of the country. And I would just like to give a shout out to my colleague Annie back there. She is responsible for the global assessment of our disaster management capabilities. So we're always trying and striving to put what we do into context, into a broader context of emergency management, into the context of how it can be used within the population. And you see two recent examples. I just returned a couple months ago from completing a workshop and assessment in Ghana. We worked very closely with them to understand what risks they felt were most important. And I think unsurprising to many of you here, they were very concerned about malaria. What does malaria look like? We had a delegation from Ghana come visit us to kick this all off. And out of 21 people, only one person had never had malaria in their entire life. So clearly that was important. So we work with them to understand the type of information they wanted to see. Again, we leveraged our relationship with NASA to build a wildfire exposure assessment for them as well. So this is just one example of kind of how we do that. And we've been doing this since 2015, and for better or for worse, that did prepare us for the Maui wildfire response. So this affected all of us personally. This picture is actually out the front window of my house. This was the Kula fire. You could see this directly from my house. I'm in Wailuku facing Kula. So on that evening, we all knew something was happening. Unfortunately for those of us, PDC is down in Kihei, and you notice that there's a large mountain range between us and Lahaina. None of us knew exactly what was going on. We were all hearing about this huge fire, so we could look up and say, oh, wow, there's a Kula fire. And there were actually 4 fires going on at the same time. So we prepared ourselves and just stood by and offered our assistance. And what we were able to do first is, you see here these maps that we produced. This side of the island was without electricity. So we were able to leverage the fact that we had electricity to produce maps for the first responders. 60% of our staff directly supported the wildfire response operations. We were dispersed across 6 locations. 6 weeks we sat in the EOC and worked side by side with those from the county and the state. We supported 5 different EOCs and produced a number of products. A few of them you see here. We worked very, very closely with all of the local, federal, and state agencies to consolidate information and provide that out. One of the things that you may have noticed is that a lot of our products were used during the briefings of the wildfire. And all of this is in the disaster-aware system still. So it is available to be used. If it's useful in your research here, do not hesitate to reach out to any of us. We can get you access, or we can get you the data itself. We were able to work with County of Maui to facilitate the free exchange of information and sharing across all agencies through our disaster-aware platform. We opened it up to everyone that was responding. And we were kind of the first that were able to provide the impact based off what I told you. Our impact assessments kind of came out with the initial first assessment of numbers, and those numbers have fairly well held up. We also, because of our unique position, we were actually able to get post-fire imagery very, very quickly, so you could see the before and after, and provide that to the Maui Fire Department, Hawaii National Guard, and ATF to support the response and the ongoing construction that is facing Lahaina. So this is just, kind of our humble contribution to the wildfire effort, and I just wanted to offer our support to this effort. I think this is a very important thing that's going on here, and anything we can do to help, please don't hesitate to reach out. And with that, thank you for your time and the invitation here today.